everybody. Welcome to an emergency Purple Insider podcast here presented by FanDuel. The Minnesota Vikings announced this morning that they have waived Adam Thielen. So the second run of Adam Thielen as a Minnesota Viking comes to an end after just 12 unproductive games. And I will read you the Vikings press release, a statement from general manager Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. He says, last week, Adam's representation approached the team and asked if we would be willing to release Adam, expressing his desire to play a bigger role in the remaining weeks of what he has indicated will be his final NFL season. Following discussions through the weekend and out of respect for Adam, we have agreed to give him the opportunity to pursue more playing time elsewhere. Adam is one of the all-time great Vikings, and we wish him and his family continued success. So to review the trade for Adam Thielen, just to go back, if you forgot what the Vikings gave up, here's what it was. Carolina, for Adam Thielen, got a 2026 fifth-round pick and a 2027 fourth-rounder in exchange for Thielen and a 2026 conditional seventh and a 2027 fifth. So there was a pick swap in 2027. The Panthers move up to a fourth, the Vikings get a fifth, and they get a 2026 fifth round pick, which if you've got your handy trade charts with you, then you'll see that it adds up to about, in the favor of the Carolina Panthers, a fourth round pick. So Thielen for a fourth turns out to be absolutely nothing for the Minnesota Vikings and a fourth round pick for the Carolina Panthers. And you can chalk that up to a very big L that goes on the growing pile of L's for the Minnesota Vikings, their front office, their coaches this year in this 4-8 season where they have produced nowhere close to what the expectations are. And that's how I would describe Adam Thielen in Minnesota. I remember after they made the trade, we had a discussion of an over-under for the number of catches that Thielen would get as a Viking. And I think that I added it up to, maybe 25 to 30, somewhere in that range was the over-under. And I think a lot of people were taking the over. They figured that Thielen would come back and he would fit in fairly well and quickly to the offense. He had been in it in 2022. And then they would maybe switch in and out him and Jalen Nailor. He would become a rotational player after those first 3 games. And that he would end up with a halfway productive season on a team that would compete for the playoffs. And we would say, hey, I know they gave up that draft capital, but here's what he gave you. That's what the expectation was for Adam Thielen in Minnesota. And what actually happened was he gave them very little in the first 3 games, totally unproductive, couple of drops mixed in there, and then was riding the pine for the rest of the time, barely getting any sort of snaps. I decided to just throw this right up here live so I can pull up the statistics for you, the final numbers on Adam Thielen with not only receptions and targets, but his snaps as well. So he finishes with 8 receptions on 16 targets, 8.6 yards per reception, and 3 drops for Thielen this year. That's what the Vikings got in return for a 4th round draft pick. And if we look at his actual snaps this season, started out with a lot of playing time in those first 3 games, 32, 38, 45. And then by the Green Bay game, he played 3 total snaps. And he was under 10 for 4 straight weeks and 5 out of the last 6 games under 10 snaps. Again, that's what the Vikings traded for with Adam Thielen. And I think that what the Thielen trade really shows us, and this was always in the cards. Now, I will say I am as surprised as anyone that it turned out this way, because when you look back at what he had done last year for the Carolina Panthers, he had 48 catches last season for 615 yards last year for Carolina. And even though the same, explosiveness was not there in Carolina like it once was for the Vikings, he wasn't in his prime. when we looked at the trade and said, well, if you're talking about a guy who had a 76.4 PFF grade in 2024, when Bryce Young threw him the ball, Bryce's quarterback rating was over 100 last year. I mean, you thought, okay, like this guy should be able to come in and get them through the first 3 games without Jordan Addison and then settle into a role the rest of the year on a team that can really use some wide receiver depth. Because, hey, if somebody gets hurt, somebody goes down, then we were talking about, well, Ty Felton is the next man up. He's never played before, and Felton was mostly on the second and third teams during training camp, so mostly second, and he's probably not ready to fill into a big role, so you need a veteran. And, Adam Thielen was a guy who was so familiar with what the Vikings did on offense that if there was anybody who could come in and just be able to slide right into that role and have success, then hey, it was going to be Adam Thielen. And he was going to bring a little veteran presence. He was going to help a young quarterback the same way that he had the previous season in Carolina. And it did not work at all. And I think that, for Thielen, it is only fair. The organization for the Vikings is doing the right thing by releasing Thielen and allowing him to go see if there's another team that's competing for a Super Bowl that needs a little wide receiver depth. If somebody's got an injury, like you could see San Francisco maybe picking him up. They've had a bunch of injuries, or, I don't know, another team that has been banged up, just bringing him in. And maybe it's Green Bay. I mean, would you be really shocked if the Green Bay Packers said, hey, we've got these receiver injuries and receiver struggles, and why don't you come in and catch a few passes for us? For him, he's playing his last season, and he's been one of the best Vikings wide receivers of all time. I think he's very borderline to that Mount Rushmore, because this is a franchise that has so many freakishly great wide receivers. And, Thielen, I think on 90% of the NFL's franchises would easily be in their Mount Rushmore of all-time great wide receivers. He's either there or maybe 5th all-time for the Vikings. So he is deserving of the reputation as one of this franchise's best wide receivers ever. And I thought at the time that it made sense because of what they had done with everything else and the whole ethos of what the Vikings were supposed to be in 2025. And this is kind of a bigger point to where if anybody comes out and says, well, this was going to be a transition year or something, this is one of those moves that you can point to and say, I don't think so. I don't think that you are able to, as the Vikings, and they haven't, but if anybody talks about this season at any point, as in, oh, well, this was going to be a development year for JJ, this was going to be a transition year, it's really next year that we were looking at, this is the trade where you would say, I don't think so, because you don't make this trade unless you completely believe that you are in a position to be in the playoffs and win in the playoffs. That's what this team expected to do from the start, and they could not have missed by more at this point. They could not have missed the mark for what they were going to be. And this trade, because there are other signings and other moves that are for multiple years. So when you extend Andrew Van Ginkel, for example, like, okay, well, that's to make sure that he's here in the future. Or even a Jonathan Allen, like it was a multi-year contract. You're expecting him here multiple years. Jordan Mason, like there's a bunch of moves they made that are not just for 2025, but also for 2026 as part of their winning window. The Adam Thielen trade was we need you right here, right now, because we are expecting to win right here, right now. And it did not happen. Not only did they not win, but they got almost nothing out of Adam Thielen. And I wish him the best. He has been one of the best players to cover for me for my entire career. He won a Stringer Award, which is the Media Good Guy Award to honor Corey Stringer that we give out every year. In 2017, I mean, he was nearly a unanimous pick that year from the media, but he has always been in that conversation every single year. He was available at his locker this year, always willing to talk. I just talked to him for a story the other day about something a little bit different. So he's been great for the community, as good as it gets, right? Like everything that you want for a player that you put in the Ring of Honor. He was a part of so many great moments during the Zimmer era, and then in 2022, still caught a lot of passes that year as part of that big season, and they tried to run it back, and it didn't work. If you were wondering, another guy that was in the running for that fill-in wide receiver, not that this matters, was Kendrick Bourne, who has 31 catches this year at 15 and a half yards per reception for the San Francisco 49ers. But what does it matter? We're just talking about the entire foundation is crumbling, and this is just talking about the windows, right? Like you're talking about a franchise that looked like it was at the top of the mountain, and a lot of decisions were clearly made with the expectation that we can do this because we're us. We won 14 games. Our decisions always work out, so we can do this because we're us. And that goes back to letting Sam Darnold go, but a lot of other things too. We can make decisions like signing older defensive tackles to exorbitant contracts that have regressed and regressed through their last few years because we're us, because we'll get more out of them. We can sign Isaiah Rodgers, who's always been a rotational player, to be a starter because we're us and we have the secret formula. We can go with a young quarterback who has never played before and barely played in college because we're us and we'll teach him, and we can do that. Everything we do ends up working out. It turns to gold. Everything we touch. We can trade for a wide receiver that is 35 years old, that was contemplating retirement already, and we can send too much draft capital over there because we're us. And it'll work because we're us, because everything that we do turns into a success. And I think that they've found out that if you make sub 50% moves and you roll the dice over and over on those moves, you can get beat just like anybody else. You're human just like anybody else. This Thielen move probably didn't have any chance of justifying the actual price. And the same goes for Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, and Hargrave's been good. It's not. They've both been decent. It would look a lot different. They end up getting beaten down for their prices, but they've both been probably good enough that if the quarterback play was fine, that it wouldn't matter. And the same thing goes for this trade. If the quarterback play was good and Darnold had come back and they were 9-3 and they released Adam Thielen because he wasn't playing, we'd be like, all right, no emergency podcast. Who cares? Move on. But this is more of a sign of everything that has gone wrong. And also, we talk a lot about the lack of young players on rookie contracts on this team. And one of the reasons that they don't have a lot of those players is, yes, as many of you have pointed out many times, they have missed on a lot of those players. But another reason is because they haven't had draft picks. And I know every time I mention that, people say, well, Rick had a lot of draft picks and he missed too. Well, yes, I get that. But your success rate with draft picks is going to be very connected to, or your total success, I should say, not your rate. Your total success is going to be connected to how many picks you have and how high they are. Like that over a long period of time, that's what it's going to be. And since this leadership has gotten here, a group that did not want to reset, didn't want to stack draft capital, wanted to win now all the time, one of the things that they've done in order to do that is they have traded a lot of draft capital, and they have treated day 3 picks like they don't matter at all. And they've just sort of thrown them away willy-nilly. And they have also spent, bigger draft capital on like a TJ Hawkinson trade. And these are in general moves that you do make when you're ready to win, because what am I saving a 5th round draft pick for if I'm ready to win right now? And that's why they make a move like this, an inefficient move. And credit to the Panthers, they held out on the Vikings and they said, you're going to pay our price or we're not going to give you Adam Thielen. And everybody remember that drama? We waited. It looked like it was over. I reported that it was near dead and then it came back to life. And I'm sure there's a story there. of what happened for how it suddenly came back to life at the last second. This also, and you can't really deny it, had the marketing element of bringing back Adam Thielen, the good feelings of bringing back Adam Thielen. And if you go back and listen to the show that I did after they did it, I was in favor of the move because I thought, well, if you guys are really going to win, then you might lose a Jalen Naylor for 6 weeks and need Adam Thielen. You might lose a Jordan Addison to whatever it might be, injury or suspension, I suppose, or another one. You never know. Could be one around the corner. And he's already had two incidents and then also had to sit out a quarter for whatever happened in London. So you never know that you might need him. But of course, that was working off of the expectation that J.J. McCarthy was going to be ready and that they were going to win more than 4 out of their last 12 games. So that's kind of where we're at with the Adam Thielen move, a real sign of everything that has gone wrong for the Minnesota Vikings. And just to finish off that point about the draft, if you are always making these moves where, okay, your left tackle gets hurt and you don't have a swing tackle that you trust on the roster, so you have to go trade for Cam Robinson, or you have to send draft capital out to trade for Cam Akers for the 5th time, then that's what ends up happening, is that you don't end up stacking draft capital. You don't have many dart throws. And if you miss on the darts that you have, this is the funny thing. People will ask about the scouting department. Like, they are scouting hundreds of players and the Vikings are taking 5. Like, I don't know. Are they doing their job? How should I know? I mean, they're looking at hundreds of players that they've got reports on and they're taking 5. And, hey, they hit on some of them. I think Levi Drake Rodriguez has been good. Will Reichert has obviously been fantastic. And I think in this league, the way it's being played now, having a really good kicker is very valuable, just all things considered. But if you only draft 5 times or 6 times, your chances of hitting on a bunch of stars, and look, Jackson's been good. Dallas Turner's been fantastic lately. Addison has been a very, very productive draft pick. So you've hit on, I think, at least semi-hit or hit on 3 out of your 4 first rounders. But if you don't have all those other picks that you've sent out to try to win right now, this is what can happen. And what it's reminiscent of, and I guess time is a flat circle, isn't it? Because what did we criticize the Vikings for a lot at the end of the Zimmer and Spielman era? It was making desperate moves. It was feeling like, hey, we got to win right now. We got to trade for whoever. We got to sign, what was it? Chris Herndon. This is the Chris Herndon trade all over again. It was a team that was not good enough, that fully believed that they were good enough, and they thought, well, we've got to give up a 4th round draft pick to get Chris Herndon to fill in for Irv Smith, which then in hindsight looks absolutely ridiculous. But that's what happens when you are in that win now desperation mode, is that you lose bigger picture of longer term team building and you get tunnel vision on the must have a number 3 receiver for these first couple games. And then if that receiver doesn't produce, you end up looking ridiculous, which is what happened. They end up looking ridiculous. So my thought was that if you're going to go all in, then go all in. And if it blows up in your face, then it blows up in your face. But this year has caused their willingness to go all in to try to win has caused long-term damage. And that's why it reminds me of Zimmer Spielman 2021, because all the things they did to mess with the salary cap and, trade out later round draft picks. When Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah got here, he had a very bad salary cap situation. He didn't have many draft picks. That's why they traded down from 12 to 32, which we all know is way too far to be trading down. But that's why they did it, is because they were trying to restock the cupboard with younger players and with draft picks. Clearly that did not work out either, but it was the same sort of stuff that has long-term implications. So now, after something like this, everything has been pushed into 2026. And unless things change wildly, over the next few weeks. I mean, they've got 8 losses. I suppose you could get to a 9-8 record. I don't think that's going to happen, but I suppose it's possible. Unless things really, really change, you're talking about a ton of pressure on everyone going into next year. And I think what we're looking at is probably more stuff like this. You've gone this far, you've gone down this road to this point, and you can't turn around now. So you've given up future draft capital for somebody like Adam Thielen, but you know what? You're probably going to do it again, because what other option do you have for next year? You've given out bad contracts, but you're probably going to do it again, because what other option do you have? And that is a bad place to be as a franchise. And that's where someone brought it up on the show last night, like this team being analytical. And my response was, show me the analytics. And this is another one of those deals where all the analytics people, when the Vikings made this trade, were like, are you joking? Are you joking? This is not a good return for this type of player. And my thought was, this isn't really a time to be analytical. And the Dallas Turner trade is not an analytical trade either. Drafting a guard is not really the most analytical decision, but not that I dislike Donovan Jackson, very high on Jackson. And I've made the argument that guards are more valuable now than ever, but still, you're talking about one of those non-premium positions. They don't get paid like edge rushers, wide receivers, quarterbacks, and corners. So they've not done a lot of stuff that really matches up with the analytics. What they've really done is a lot of stuff that matches up with a team that is absolutely certain that they are going to compete for a Super Bowl. And I think that there's going to be a turning point moment that we always look back at. So when I go back to the Zimmer and Spielman, we know what the turning point moment is. It's when they sign Kirk, clearly. That the franchise, and then there's another turning point moment after they win in 2019, and they make a lot of decisions based on winning, having a good season, and then winning that one playoff game. They made a lot of decisions to extend Zim, to extend Kirk, and keep running it back, and hope to have a competitive rebuild. Again, time is a flat circle here. Like, that's what they were hoping for then. So there's these turning points. And the one that we're going to look at for a really long time with the Minnesota Vikings, and it connects to the Thielen trade, is the game against the Los Angeles Rams in the playoffs. Because if they played well in that game and lost, Sam Darnold probably is back on the franchise tag. If they hadn't been beaten in so many very clear areas, the interior of the offensive line, the interior of the defensive line not being able to pressure Matthew Stafford up the middle and having to rely on blitzes, which they still do, by the way. They still blitz like crazy. That hasn't changed. The running game. Now, it's not a bad trade for Jordan Mason, but isn't it though? Like when Rico Dowdle is playing really well, or Javonte Williams is playing really well, and these were just free agents. You didn't have to trade any draft capital for them, and now you're not even using Jordan Mason. It's 3rd and 1, and you're not even using Jordan Mason. And the Vikings have, I saw Alec Lewis tweet out, what's Mason run for this year? Let me take a look. Mason has run for 578 yards. I mean, he's been good. They just don't give him the ball. And that's even with him playing as in a starting role. And it's another trade where you had to give up draft capital. And you could say, and I have in the past, and I'm guilty of this, of saying, well, look, it's only a 4th, 5th swap. What are the odds of that hitting? Oh, it's only, I forget what they gave up for Jordan Mason. It's only this to get Jordan Mason. It's only this to get Cam Robinson. It's only this. And then at the end of the day, it's sort of like me going to Taco Bell all the time. Well, it's only my 4th trip this week to Taco Bell. It doesn't add up, right? And then you look at your credit card bill and you go, I spent $100 this week at Taco Bell. And it feels like the same sort of thing here, where it's like, okay, each individual trade where you're giving up swaps or you're giving up conditional this or whatever, it all ends up adding up. And if you don't win right now, then this is what you end up with, is a trade that has just cost you future draft capital and you get absolutely nothing in return. Since every show does have a FanDuel question of the day, And I'm going to do a show again later we've got a roundtable later on. This is the second straight week we've had an emergency podcast, then a roundtable. So there's going to be a roundtable later tonight. So if you're just joining, welcome. A little emergency podcast action here. And the FanDuel question of the day is going to be, the Vikings are 1.5 point underdogs to the Washington Commanders. I mean, they're 1.5 point underdogs at home to a team that has, is that 3 wins or is it 4? How many do they have? They have 3 wins. Quite a game last night. But is this the lowest point? When was the last lowest point for you? I've talked about this a lot. When was the last lowest point for you? Because them releasing Adam Thielen is sort of reminiscent of 2010, where they bring back Randy Moss and then they release Randy Moss. I don't think I think there were low moments in between that. But being a 1.5 point underdog to the Washington Commanders, who just lost last night in overtime to Denver and have had an absolutely miserable year and are now sitting at 3-9. You are underdogs to a 3-9 team. Unimaginably low position. When's the last lowest position that you can remember? 2016, when they lost all those games at the end of the year. Yep, for sure. Let's talk about something else. So I appreciate the comments, and let me get to some of them. Thank you to Fargo Brady for the super chat. Says, I'm over all of it. Kwesi can't draft. KOC has zero desire to change his offense. Elevate B-Flow and get Dable or Mikey M from Miami. Oh yeah, he might get fired too. Well, look, we've reached the point where a lot of times, and I always try to keep the bigger picture in mind. So when we're talking about KOC, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, it is just 1 year ago that the Vikings were heading into December as a Super Bowl contender. They beat the Falcons against Kirk. They beat the Packers. Since that Packers game, they are 4-10, by the way. Since that Packers game. Mind-blowing. They went 14-2 and then 4-10. That's incredible. I would love to see in history what other franchise has taken a left turn like that to go 14-2 through week 17 of last year. And then since then, 4-10. That is just absolutely wild. But in terms of major changes, the front office is a discussion. The head coach is in discussion. When you are 4-8 and you're an underdog to a 3-9 team, everything is on the table. There is nothing that you guys can say, hey, what if they make this change or what if they make that change, that I can say, hey, no, I would never do that, or I could never see that happening, because how could you say that at this point? After I saw today, Aaron Schatz put this out there, formerly of Football Outsiders, now FTN Fantasy, his DVOA statistic. And one of the things that's great is that it's been around for a long time and it's got historical data. This was, according to him, this offensive performance against Seattle, worse than 41 donut. It's the worst offensive performance since 1978 for the Vikings. That's just when the data starts. Who knows how much farther it could have gone back. So when you guys are pointing these things out, at some point, every move that you make has a bunch of potential outcomes, right? One of the outcomes for Adam Thielen is that this works fine. There was never a high end to this. There was never Adam Thielen comes back and is a mega star again and he's jumping over Marshawn Lattimore like it was 2017. That was never on the table. But 30 catches, 25, play decently through the first 3 weeks, give him a dozen catches through the first 3 weeks and then fill into a role. But every move that we make, there's a spectrum. And I remember talking about this when Seth Walder of ESPN put out his grades for their offseason moves, and he slaughtered them. He gave them terrible grades. And I went through them, and I chatted with Seth after because he was watching the show. And I went through them, and what I said about his grades was that they all have range of outcomes. That there is a world where a Jonathan Allen deal turns out great for them. And if he's even 2/3 of what Jonathan Allen has been, and they're a winning team, all of it had, the only way that these moves were going to work was if they were a winning team and they got good quarterback play. And that's why it all circles back to that and that one decision. But just going back to the point about the Rams game being a pivot point, is that game, I think, really inspired them to move on from Darnold and to go and make all these types of moves. And being that close, feeling like they were that one game away, it is reminiscent of getting Kirk in 2018. Whereas, like, if we only had better quarterback play, we'll just get back to the NFC Championship and then we'll just win that game and then we'll get to the Super Bowl because we've got a better quarterback. And from year to year, things change that are out of your control. Schedules change. I looked this up yesterday. Last year, the Minnesota Vikings beat one team with a top 10 defense. One team. It was actually Green Bay twice, but they beat one team with a top 10 defense. This year, they have faced, at least in the top 12, I think it was 6 of the top 12 or 5 of the top 12, and lost every game. I mean, schedules. Oh no, they beat the Browns. That was the one. That was the other one. They beat the Browns. So in the last 2 years, they've got 3 wins versus top 10 defenses and against 2 total teams. I mean, sometimes it's how the schedule plays out. That, last year, I think we all knew had smoke and mirrors elements to it because of the schedule, but still, Sam Darnold is proving that he isn't just a fluke. And I think this team would have been still in the race with even decent quarterback play, but they didn't get it. And a lot of these things would probably look better with decent quarterback play. Although Thielen, I mean, at no point really from the start looked like the Adam Thielen that we remembered in any way, or even the Adam Thielen that played for the Panthers last year. So anyway, just kind of bouncing all over the place a little bit now, but there is implications to these things even if you're doing them in small little increments of bringing this guy, bringing that guy. And when you're doing it out of desperation, you always take the risk that something like this could happen. And if you add up where you end up missing on move after move after move after move, this is what you get. And one thing that I wrote about yesterday was that because so many things had gone right for them, it felt like, even from my seat, and I'm sure a lot of yours as well, that like they've just got the touch. Like they just are very good at making these deals that are a little bit suspect work out for them. Maybe it's starting an undrafted free agent or something like Jalen Redmond. Like, oh, okay, well, I guess they're going to lean into this UDFA and then it works. Or last year signing Sam Darnold. Okay. I liked that move when they signed him because I thought $10 million, why not? But there was a lot of people, including in the betting markets, that had them winning 6 games, and then they proved everyone wrong. Oh, Aaron Jones is too old. Nope, I guess he's not. Like, I guess they figured it out. The medical staff got it right. And this year, every single one of those moves that were kind of bad moves or questionable that had ended up working out, they all went back the other way. So moves that we saw the numbers on, like, hey, Aaron Jones is a little on the older side. And then, hey, whoa, he actually proved us all wrong. But what was the likelihood that he did it again? Well, after proving everybody wrong once, what was the likelihood that he proved us wrong again? And just to go into this theme a little bit deeper, even like a Byron Murphy, who I was very much for, and it's a longer term contract. I think he's a good player, but 6 interceptions is what got him paid. He wasn't going to get 6 picks again. He had never done it before in his career, and he gets paid on 6 picks. Now, the other options, DJ Reed, Charvarius Ward, those guys haven't worked out either for big signings. So, I'm still good with that. I'm still good with signing Byron Murphy, but the price tag had a lot to do with, this guy got 6 picks, and he can buck the trend, right? Of corners who get a big year and get paid and then do not perform at the same level. So all over the field, there's these decisions, or even like a Will Fries, who I think has been fine, but it's like, is it worth $17 million? Well, we wanted them to do the guard thing really badly, but their desperation played into paying a guy $17 million at that position. Is it a great move? Is it the most savvy move? No. And if you do that over and over and over and over again, you're going to get bit pretty hard. And at some point, and that's what happened here. Like, if you're betting on a quarterback who's never played, who the comparables are Mitch Trubisky and Mark Sanchez, and you're saying, no, we're different, you might get bit. And if you're getting a 35-year-old wide receiver who's regressed and might not be able to do the things that he did before, you might get bit and you give up a big price for him. And so that is the theme of this year, is that every risky move that they made that probably has less than a 50% chance, but is a big roll of the dice, has not ended up playing out for them. So Isaiah said these jokers, well, they didn't trade away Cam Bynum, but they let go Cam Bynum, which I know now kind of feels like whatever. I mean, okay, but it's a fair point that their assessment of a lot of things, including allowing Cam Bynum to go, because I'm certain that Cam Bynum would have stayed, but allowing him to go, betting on Theo Jackson. Again, this was a 6th round pick who was released by the Titans. And from my perspective, he was having good training camps and stuff, which I think now it's going to be a little bit harder when we get into camp. I think there's going to be a lot of fans being like, oh, someone looks good. Are you sure? But the same sort of thing of, well, is it a good bet to bet on a guy who has been really good for them behind the scenes? He's made a handful of plays when he's gotten in, but your other guy is worth 15 mil on the open market because he's an excellent player. And you said, no, we can make the bad move because we've got the answers. And what football teaches you is that nobody has all the answers. So that's another one to look at. I mean, I think in the bigger picture for this year, that wouldn't have made much of a difference, but he got a 4-year contract. So that would have been somebody who was on the younger side when Harrison Smith retires to be able to, go with. So and Josh Metellus, I think, has shown that, he isn't really that kind of player. Like, I think Josh is still a very good player, but he's good in his role. I don't think he's good in that role to take over for Harrison Smith. So now you've got nothing there, and you've got to look into the draft or in the free agency next year to try to solve that problem. Did I see the missed tackle of Mekhi Blackman? Now that one they got right. Mekhi Blackman has not played well for Indianapolis at all. So that one they got right. They have not missed on every single thing. Still praying 78 says, seems like the Wilfs are letting fans run the team as much as you want to appease the fans. The bottom line is you're here to win a Super Bowl, not do what the fans want. I do think that this move in particular, and I mean, I've had conversations about this, with people. I think this move in particular had an element of it that was all the way up to the top, which was the Wilfs love Adam Thielen. The organization loves Adam Thielen, and they should. I mean, this guy has been one of the best players that you could ever ask for from an undrafted free agent, one of the best stories in the NFL of the last decade. I mean, a guy comes from, did you know that? He went to Mankato. I mean, but Detroit Lakes. So I think that was part of it. I do think that was part of it. I would say, though, that at the same time, and that's probably why the Panthers were able to hold out and get their price. But at the same time, he did have good numbers last year. So it wasn't completely like a total fanboy move. It was, and I think I mentioned this, that if there was a player named Bob Johnson that had 48 catches and whatever number of yards, and the quarterback had trusted him, that you probably feel good about the move. So, that this is where, like, the hindsight element, but I also think we can't just keep going back to, well, if we knew at the time, because eventually the results are the things that matter. And that's why I always get irritated with people who say process over results. It's like, nah, they hire and fire you over the results. It is your jobs to get the results right more than you get them wrong. And what happened with this team is that they got the results right a lot of times. And I think that they believed that they would just keep getting suboptimal moves to end up working out. And it does make it massively worse that the Panthers are good. It really does. It makes it massively worse that the Panthers are good and they beat the Rams, the team that just beat the tar out of the Vikings last year and has been the cream of the crop in the NFL, my Super Bowl pick for a long time. and they pulled off a crazy win against the Rams. And then this happens. Everything coming up Panthers at the moment. So, this is where it is very hard though to separate. And people ask about, well, is it this person's fault? Is it that person's fault? When I mention like the from the top element of wanting Adam Thielen back, this whole thing that's happened this year with all the moves that have gone sideways, it's on everybody because they all get together and they all decide on a direction. And that direction included going to a young quarterback and moving on from Darnold. And it included, just selling out on these moves to try to win right now in these next 2 seasons. But the Thielen move was a very much win right the frick now when this year, in fact, it was actually a trade of a 4th round pick to win in a single moment, in a single section of games. Like they figured that the schedule was easier at the beginning and they had to get ahead. So they traded for a player for 3 games. I mean, again, suboptimal. Like if it worked out, then yeah. But I mean, from the very beginning, there's a really good chance that it doesn't. So anyway, I don't want to make this quite the marathon. But yeah, Malkill, you're right. The Wilfs have 5 playoff wins in 20 years. Well, that's another thing is that you keep, going back to the bigger picture results on this regime. And it's been some fun regular seasons, but no playoff wins in 4 years and a lot of wreckage to deal with. I mean, as we start looking at what they've got for the future here, now I actually do like the chances that Ty Felton develops, but you look around even at the wide receiver room, not that Thielen was going to be a big part of it, but Jordan Addison with the suspension and with his performance this year, you certainly put in question about what his future is going to be. Justin Jefferson, we haven't even talked about that much because I'm saving that for a whole show, but with Justin Jefferson with the towel on his head yesterday, refusing to talk to the media after the game. I mean, there are so many fires to put out for this group. How can you do that all in one off season? And then the quarterback position, I was watching Dan Orlovsky this morning and he's talking about, well, in order to save Justin Jefferson in Minnesota, you have to go get Daniel Jones, who's a free agent, or Mac Jones from the 49ers, who they'd have to trade more capital for out of desperation. And he might be right. And I think we're even at the point where if JJ McCarthy comes back and plays well, you still have to do something like that. But that's where we're at right now. I mean, the Lions still have a good team. The Packers have a really good team. The Bears are on the rise. And you're talking about saving the franchise and saving the franchise player by getting Mac Jones. That was the FanDuel question of the day. The Vikings 1.5 point underdogs to a 3-9 team. Is this the lowest point since when? And the answer is in a really long time. It is moves like this because I know a lot of you are bringing up, is it possible that they send somebody over the plank? It's when you have repeated moves that go sideways, you start to get into that area. I'm not calling for it. I'm just saying the reality of the NFL is when you have a record like this and you're an underdog to a 3-9 team and your superstar player is infuriated every single week and your moves are going belly up constantly. Yep. Boy, things can change a lot in a year, can't they? Holy cow. I do want to say again, before I just wrap up this emergency podcast, best of luck to Adam and his family, wherever they end up going. Just one of the more high-class players that you'll ever run into in a career for myself covering players. It was great to have him back, a familiar face, and chat with him in the locker room. Unfortunately, it didn't, work out for him, but I think somebody in the NFL will pick up Adam Thielen and he'll have a chance, very likely to play in the playoffs because of whatever injury here or there. And we'll be following him from afar once again. And I also don't think it's any sort of blemish on his record as a Minnesota Viking. Like, with Randy Moss, it kind of was because it all went so miserably. In this case, his agent just went to the team and said, look, you guys are 4-7, 4-8 now. Can you just let him get one more chance with somebody else that because he hasn't won a Super Bowl. He's been through some miserable seasons here. So we'll see where he latches on. If it ends up being Green Bay, though, that's, ugh. That would talk about salt. There's been so much salt in the wounds. They got a Mack truck pouring salt all over the wounds at this point with the Panthers beating the Rams. If Thielen goes to of all teams, I mean, would you be shocked if he went to the Rams? If they need, a number 3 wide receiver behind Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, I wouldn't be shocked if he goes to any of these good teams. So anyway, there you go. So there's your emergency podcast. The Vikings release Adam Thielen, a sign of the times. So thanks everybody for watching / listening. And we'll have another live show later on tonight with the roundtable. Where do we go from here with the 4-8 Minnesota Vikings? Thanks for watching and listening. And we'll catch you all later on today. Football.